creatives, Karen here, mixed media artist and creative at By the Wolf Moon. I am doing something a little different with this video as I am slowly getting more comfortable with this whole YouTube thing. I thought we could do a face-to-face intro. And with this video I am doing a Christmas craft activity, so I'm going to be making a gift and sharing that with you. So here I am in my dining room slash craft area. My craft area takes up a lot of the top floor of my house and some of the bottom floor. So it is a bit messy, but I like it that way. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be making my mum's Christmas gift, or part of her Christmas gift. I try to give her something every year that is a Christmas decoration of sorts. My mum loves Christmas and she decorates her house really beautifully, so I like to contribute to that if I can. And she's not on YouTube, she's not really social media savvy, so there's no worries about her seeing this before Christmas, but this is what we're going to do. I saw this really gorgeous board book, The 12 Days of Christmas, and it has been illustrated by Jan Brett. It is secondhand, and but in really beautiful condition, and the illustrations are the reason I bought it because they're just stunning. I really love them. So I am going to be turning this into something just a little bit more special, and this is what I'm going to be creating. So let's get started. Alrighty, here we are on my craft table, and my first step is to give this book a really good clean because it is second hand, and as it's a board book, it's probably being slobbered on by babies or little children, and so I want to clean all that off and make sure I've got a nice clean surface to work on. One thing I did notice is if I rubbed too hard with the isopropyl alcohol when I was cleaning these pages, it did remove the ink, so be aware of that if you are cleaning a book yourself with this method. Now it is time to start removing the covers. I wanted to create my own cover, so I'm just removing the back cover and the front cover with a sharp craft knife. I did replace the blade in this before I started, but it possibly wasn't a very good one. So yeah, front and back cover removed, and the next back page. Basically I just wanted the pages of the book that had the 12 Days of Christmas poem on it. So that's what I'm left with. And then to get rid of all those tatty bits, I just used some sandpaper to give me a nice smooth finish again. The next step, I really wanted to gild the outside pages of the book, and to do this I clamped the book really tightly together, the pages really tightly together, and then used a metallic acrylic paint. This one is a resin paint and I cannot remember the name of it, I'm sorry, but it's a beautiful colour and it gives a really nice glittery shimmer, just really similar to a book with gilded pages. So I just gave the outside of this book one coat, I think, with this paint was all it needed, and then made sure it was clamped tightly together before I painted it, which stopped the paint going between the pages. And once it was dry I could unstick them because they're obviously stuck together because you painted them together, so I had to unstick every single one, but as you can see the paint pretty much stayed on the outside and didn't seep into the pages, which was great. Any little spots that did I could just scrape off with my fingernail, so that worked really well. The next step is to start creating a new cover. I am just using an old cardboard box, fairly heavy cardboard, quite stiff and thick, and I simply measured the height and width of the book and then added only 5 mil. I think I wanted it to be slightly bigger than the body of the book itself, and cut that out of cardboard. I cut two, one for the back and one for the front cover, measured it, held it up against the book, fitted it together to make sure that it was the size that I wanted, and then also cut a spine from the same cardboard, and the spine was just the width of the body of the book and the height of the covers that I just cut. Now I'm going to put the book cover together. So I am using my craft mat and the lines on it to make sure the height of each of the three pieces is the same, and leaving a small gap of a few millimeters between each piece, and then I'm just sticking a piece of masking tape to hold them in place so they don't move while I get more masking tape and tape them securely together. This is just a kind of to hold the cover together. I will be covering it up a bit, covering up that masking tape a bit later with fabric, which will be a more secure hold than masking tape. Just making sure that the body of the book fits nicely within the cover that I have made, and I'm pretty happy with that at this stage. And now I am going to start covering this new cover. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of papers that I like from this Graphics 45 pad and then work out what I'm going to do. I have this wooden Christmas tree, die cut Christmas tree, that if you saw my last video on the advent calendar was on the first advent calendar I made 10 years ago, and because I can't throw anything out, especially anything crafty, I still have it, and I'm wanting to reuse that on the cover of this book. So just kind of got it out to get an idea of what papers I wanted to use with it. And here is my crafty companion who likes to be involved in all crafting that I do, Cersei, coming to say hello. I think I ended up choosing 4 different pieces of paper to use, all quite different and probably a little bit excessive. I could have used the same paper but Christmas is an excessive time and I like to use all the cool stuff all at once. So first I measured out a piece of paper that is slightly larger than the cover, and I'm working on the front cover here. And so on the 3 sides, the top, bottom and the outer side, I've left maybe 1.5 centimeters to 2 centimeters overlap and cut out the piece. And now I'm just deciding what I want for the back cover. So as you can see, 2 quite different papers that I've chosen, but I've decided on this plain black one with the corner detail, and I'm just going to cut a piece of that the same as the piece I cut for the front cover. And now I'm just going to use PVA glue, I think you call it tacky glue in America, to glue this piece of paper that I've cut onto the covers. I like to put the glue all over the cover and then spread it out with my finger. I think it gives a much nicer even coat, it dries faster, and and you know, the paper sticks together better. And then I make sure it's really well stuck down by smoothing it out with my bone folder. Wipe off any excess glue, then I flip the cover over, and I'm just going to crease each of those 3 edges initially to make it easier to fold them over in a few minutes. That also lets me see where to trim the edges of the corners off. So you want to trim just outside the crease, and not too close to the corner of the cardboard cover. You want maybe a millimetre between the cardboard cover and where you're cutting, so that the corner is actually covered, although you'll see that I'm going to fix this up a bit later on anyway. So once the corners have been trimmed, then I can glue down and fold over those flaps, which will give the cover a nice, neat, tidy finish. And basically just using tacky glue again, doing the top and bottom first, and then the long side, making sure it's really well stuck down, and using some little bulldog clips just till it takes hold, so that they're nice and firmly stuck down. And I am pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to flip it over and do exactly the same thing on the back. Make sure that you have your paper up the right way before you glue it on, which I did, thank goodness, but I've done that before where I've glued things on upside down. It happens all the time. So now it is time to double check again that everything is as it should be and fitting where I want it to fit. And now it's time to decide what I'm going to do on the inside of the covers. And I really like this piece of paper for the inside back cover. And I'm going to team it up with this really cool paper which I've had in my stash for years and years and years. And then I am going to choose the papers for the inside front cover. That was a little bit harder because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do here, but I figured it out, of course. And actually you'll see I used 6 different papers all together. Now it's just a matter of measuring out a piece to fit that inside cover, just a couple of mils shorter than the cover itself. Now I've left this bit in, but what I actually did was, even though I marked the paper where I was supposed to cut it, I cut it in completely the wrong place, and so it ended up being much too short. But like I tell my students, or the people that come and craft with me all the time, that there is no mistake that can't be fixed. And so I left this in here so you can see how there's no point panicking when something like this happens. You can easily just fix it, and I always see mistakes like this as an opportunity to create something even more awesome, because you think of ways to rectify it that you may not have ever thought of when you are creating the design in your head, and so often the piece ends up being even more awesome than you had anticipated. So while this was not as major of a disaster as I have had in some creative exercises I've done, it was pretty easily rectified and fixed, and I just wanted to share that with you so that you know that even people like me who have been crafting for years and years and years and years, we still make silly mistakes. So there we go, all fixed basically. I'm just going to glue that down with tacky glue, and then I will cover it up a little bit more later on, you will see. You'll notice that I am not taking this inside piece all the way up to the crease in the spine, and that's because the spine is going to be covered, and so the edge of that paper will be covered. I don't need to go right up to the spine. And now it is just doing the same process on the back cover with the other piece of paper that I chose. And I'm going to be very careful this time not to make the same mistake again, because that has also been known to happen. So I'm carefully measuring it out and cutting it to size. So I now have the cover of the book completely covered in pretty paper, apart from the spine, which we will fix later on. And now I wanted to try something that I have never tried before. I wanted to put leather looking corners on this book, and so I had in my sewing stash this kind of pearlescent vinyl, but I didn't just want it to be plain, so I decided I'd put it through my Cuttlebug and see if I could emboss it. And you can. Now, so I cut 4 strips of the vinyl, about just random sizes. I didn't really measure it out too much, which made it easier to fit through the Cuttlebug. Plus the embossing folder I was using was just a little strip folder, so that made it much easier. Like I said, I've never done this before. I don't know if the embossing is going to hold permanently, but what I'm hoping is that once it is glued down, that will be enough to keep the impression of the embossing folder. So I put it through a few times and that's how it turned out. I am pretty happy with that. I will say by the time I got it on the book, it wasn't quite as clear, but still very visible, and still really happy with the result. So now I am taking those strips and gluing them across the corner of the front cover. So just again with tacky glue, putting a diagonal line, covering the corner in tacky glue, and then placing the vinyl on that on an angle. And then the next step is to, once that has taken hold and got quite a good hold, flip it over, and I'm going to take a right angle ruler and make a 45-degree angle, I think it is. I'm not so good at maths, but that is where I'm going to trim off this leather. Now, not right up to the corner again. We want a mil or 2 mils space between the corner of the book and where you cut the vinyl off. So that's important, because otherwise you'll have the corner will be exposed. And then it's simply a matter of folding it over. Now, it doesn't look like it's going to come together at first, but because vinyl is so pliable, it's just again a matter of wiggling it and stretching it a little bit until the 2 edges come together and you get a really nice corner. Then I trimmed it to a point the same as you can see on the bottom corner of the book, which I have already done. I just measured it against the bottom corner so that they were the same and looked cohesive, and then cut the end of that strip on a diagonal on both sides and glued it down with tacky glue. I did have to hold it for a minute or two until the glue took hold, but it wasn't too long, and it looks really cool. I'm pretty happy with that finish and how it looks, and I think I'll be doing more of these corners on journals in the future. And then for the back cover, because on the black paper that I chose there is one corner that has a silver print on the paper, I only covered 3 corners of the book. So I'm a bit random like that. I don't need everything to be matchy, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And now I am just going to make great use of the opportunity for awesomeness I gave myself when I incorrectly cut the paper for the inside front cover, and add a little ribbon trim just to cover up the line that was hardly visible, but I knew it was there and I wanted it covered up, so I'm just using some festive ribbons and a cute little star or snowflake button. I think I chose the star. So I am just using Halma 450 glue, one of my favourite glues to use for crafting, to glue that down securely. And ta-da! I have made the most of my opportunity for awesomeness. Which never would have happened if I hadn't have made that mistake in the first place. But I like how it's turned out. Alrighty then, I went through my Christmas fabric stash and found this really beautiful fat quarter, which is a print of the 12 Days of Christmas, and I have had it for years and years and years, probably over a decade. Can't tell you where I got it from, but it fits perfectly with the theme of this book, obviously. So I have cut 3 strips, the height of the book, and the width is enough to cover that center spine. I am using my Halma 450 for this rather than tacky glue. It doesn't seep through the fabric as much as tacky glue does, and covering the center spine, making sure to get into those creases of the spine. Halma 450 glue also dries really quick, which is one of the reasons I like it so much. For the outside of the spine, I have embossed some more vinyl, and I'm going to glue that onto the outside cover and fold it over the top so it just comes onto the inside of the spine and covers the edge of that fabric I glued there. I made sure to get into the creases with the vinyl, but the vinyl it tends to actually crease more and create bubbles more than normal cotton fabric, so I did have to be careful to smooth that out properly and then let it dry properly before I did too much else to it. So once I had the edges all stuck down tidily and properly, I once again just checked everything was fitting and working as it should, and put that aside to dry so that I could start the front page of the book itself. I am really particular about acknowledging the work of other artists, and so when I am altering a book, even when I'm making journals out of books, I don't like to completely cover up the name of the author or illustrator if their work is still visible. And as this project in particular is very much about the original book and the original artwork, I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged the original artist. So because I still wanted to decorate this page a little bit with the pretty paper that I chose, I thought the easiest way to keep the illustrator's name and the title of the book was to create a little door. So this is what I'm doing here. So I just took some measurements from the cover to work out what size I needed my door to be. When you're doing this and transferring the measurements to the back side of the paper, remember that you are doing it as a mirror image, if that makes sense. Because I have done this before and forgotten that, and then my door has ended up in completely the wrong place. But I'm sure you guys out there are way too clever to do that. Once I have this door all square and ready to go, I am deciding what I want to put on the back of it, because the back of it will be visible once it's open. And so I've chosen another piece of paper again, and have decided to go for this Christmassy bell for the inside of that door. So that's pretty easy, just a case of cutting a piece the exact same size as the door that I've made, making sure it fits, and then I am cutting out the three sides of that square that I made. So one side will be the hinge side, I guess, if you like, and then the other three I cut open so that the door works like a flap. When making these cuts, it's important to go only up to exactly the corner point and not past it. It won't be too big of a deal, but it may create an opportunity for awesomeness for you to play with later if you do. So once that's done and the flap is working, or the door is working, I also decided I needed a little door handle. That was just a case of taking a small piece of ribbon, folding it in half and gluing it in between the outside of the door and the inside piece that I have cut. It was at this point that I realized that I wanted to ink the edges of the paper, because it just looks much nicer not having a white border where you have cut paper. So I did that. Would have been slightly easier if I'd done that before I had glued the piece of ribbon on, but never mind, still worked. And then once that was all done, I could glue the back of the door to the front, and I used the Halma 450 again for this rather than PVA, because PVA does make paper quite wet and I didn't really want any wrinkles or creases in the two pieces of paper. After checking that everything was where I wanted it to be and all the writing was within that door, I sanded down the sides of this page of the book so that they were not shiny, and this was to make sure that the glue stuck properly when I glued the scrapbook paper onto the book page. Now I just need to trim up the sides of this page a little bit and round the corners so that it fits nicely onto that page. You'll notice that the paper doesn't fit exactly up to the top or bottom of the page, but don't worry about that because I will be fixing that very shortly. So once it is all squared up nicely and the corners are rounded, I inked the edges of this page again, so that because inked edges look so much nicer than bright white edges, and then glued it down using PVA or tacky glue, whatever you guys call it wherever you're watching from. White glue. And now to take care of the top and bottom, so I'm just going to put a little bit of ribbon trim at the top and the bottom, and because I could not decide which one I wanted, I think the polka dot one actually looked better, but I really love this embroidered floral one, so I decided to use both, of course. So now on to the back page of the book, and I'm going to use this pretty paper. And it's just a matter of basically doing exactly what I've done before, which is cutting a piece of paper to size and gluing it down. I also made sure to sand this page again before I did the gluing, to take that gloss off it and make sure that the glue stuck the scrapbook paper to the book really well. And of course I made sure to ink the edges of the scrapbook paper to take care of that white border before I glued it down. And that's where I'm going to leave part one of this altered book. I don't want the video to be too long, and in the next part I will be decorating the cover. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.